If I look familiar to anybody, my picture's in a lot of the post offices. Like that was pre the Lord, though. Yeah. Thank you for having me here today. Praise the Lord. You know, this setup here, I used to fly airplanes for a living, and this is like kind of like being in an airplane. I got all these buttons to push and microphones.
Talk into the mic.
Oh, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay too?
No.
If I get away?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm stuck here, right?
Some of us are old.
I usually have those lapels, but I think you're doctrinally disapproved of those, so I'm now here with this. Anyway, I am in this context of the act of watching things, you know, like about what's going on. I've always kind of been that way, watching world events and geopolitical things and stuff like that. But my favorite thing to teach is when we went to China, my heart was to raise up leaders over there. That's what we really wanted to do. It wasn't that I was going there to evangelize China. They are going to evangelize China, and they are doing that very well. And they're even moving into the eastern countries now because of the trade routes that have been there for years. But lately here, the past few years, I've been watching a lot of what's going on. So everything that I'm thinking and doing today is kind of in the context of the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, which isn't far away. And even if it is far away, it's moving really fast. I mean, time is moving. I mean, this is like very fast. I mean, even little kids are saying that today. You know, that we always say that because we're a little older. We look back and man, how time has gone by so fast. I wish I could live it over again. That kind of things. But you know, have you ever seen a funnel? You know, when it's full and at the top it isn't even moving, but it's gushing out the bottom, and it just keeps going down. And then when it gets to the end, it starts to swirl, isn't it? And that's exactly a sign of the times today. I'm not kidding you. There's never ever been such a convergence of prophetic events moving so fastly together, you can hardly keep up with them if you're watching. And some are called to watch more than others. And then it says, those that know the signs of the times and know what to do, they will teach many. They will teach many. And so I've heard that Jim teaches a lot on the end time and lifts up Israel as a nation and things like that. So I know, and you're even in to the blood moons that were happening a year or two ago, which tonight I'm going to share a little bit on those because they're so significant of what's happening, and they've opened up an era of time for us, and those are signs in the sky, just like the star was a sign in the sky for them to follow and find Jesus. There will be signs in the heavens that show us. They don't make things happen, but they're just saying, okay, from now on, this era of time is going to be significant that we're in. And we're only 2 years out of, or maybe not even quite 3 years out of the blood moons in 2015. And that was pretty heavy. I think I want to share a little bit about, I was called to China in 1972. I had just gotten saved, and it was within a year I got called to China. China was closed at that time. I had to wait 12 years before I could go to China. A lot of things happened in my life before then, including a divorce. And God can use you. No matter what's happening in your life or what condition you're in, God can use you, and He wants to use you, and He probably is using you. And this China thing is a big deal, and they're one of the main players. They're going to be one of the main players, and they really are right now. And I was there for almost 18 years and came out about 5 or 6 years ago and just returned. And it was quite an experience returning to see some of the brothers and sisters that we've raised up over there and what they're doing. Napoleon said something very interesting, and you probably know what it is, if you can imagine, way back there. He said that when China awakes, the whole world will tremble. And that's where we're at right now. So the main players right now are China, Israel, and the Far East region. You know that. And so things are just moving. And in China, there's been such a change in the last 6 years since I left that is scary. And what I mean by that is not spiritually, where there's church is still in trouble over there. The government is unfriendly to us. And there's lots of persecution. And this new guy, his name is Xi Jinping. He's an old Mao Zedong guy. And Mao Zedong almost ruined China completely. And Mao Zedong, the spirit of that devil is still in China, strongly. And he wants all cults out of China within 5 years. So we are a cult compared to what they relate to. So there's an underground church and there's a government church, and we'll get into that in the slides. But it's just amazing how China is coming on so strong and so fast in their secular realm. When I used to live there, when I first got there in the 90s, I think my first trip was in 86, and when I finally moved over there in 90, it was difficult to do anything there. Get tickets on the train or plane, and the streets were dirty, and everything was just unorganized. Mao Zedong had almost ruined that whole country. It almost was off the charts. Now, I go back, and it's like, wow, they're way ahead of us in a lot of ways in the secular realm. I mean, it's just together. Clean airports, clean streets. You got all these, they do everything by phone. We get that. I'll get to that later. But I'm going to try and manipulate this thing to work and see. I'm going to use my little mouse here to see if can you see the mouse moving up? Okay. If somehow this mouse doesn't work, I'm going to switch to my 1947 Plymouth antenna. I'm going to stretch it out. So, yeah, this is unusual. But anyway, I want to see if this will click. Do I see? Let's see. No. I got to get this together.
Work to the top.
What are we doing here? How come it doesn't...
I think you want to think about the versus the R.
Oh, okay. Oh. I'm not sure why, but whenever I'm speaking in this area, Jay comes. And about a third of the way through, he starts getting really nervous and he lights up, right? And then everybody else starts lighting up. So I'm just trying to caution you a little bit not to smoke while I'm speaking because we can't see anything. Actually, I'm just joking with you. This is a pictograph, correct? It's a picture that tells you what to do. And they're very common in America now, but all over Europe, they're always there. So this says not to smoke. Well, Chinese characters are also made of pictographs. And they have hundreds of characters, I know several of them, that depict Bible stories. And they were written hundreds of years before the Bible was ever written. And so I'll just run a few by you. If this, oops, I'm hitting the wrong one. There we go. This one, sometimes you see this in Chinese restaurants. And it means, it's pronounced fu, and it means, they think it means good luck. But what it really means is blessing. This character over here, right there, that is a radical, and it's the character by itself for Shangdi, God. The old patriarchs of China used to worship the same God that we worship, believe it or not, way back, way back, way back. You can see their characters carved into rocks in the countryside about Shangdi, the God, the creator of all the universe. Well, a lot of cults have moved in there, the Indians and the Buddhists and all that, and it's taken over. And so a lot of Bible stories to a lot of people in China are simply folklore. That's what they are. But that's how they learn English a lot, is reading the Bible. When the missionaries go over there as English school teachers, they teach out of the Bible in the universities. And because they consider the Bible one of the greatest literature feats of all time, and that's where to study English. So it's really great. But these characters were all made all before. This is, let me get this here quick. Okay, so this top character here is I'm going to get my antenna. Okay. This top character up there is the number one, or first. And the next character can be either mouth or it can be person. It depends on what the other characters are saying. In China, they don't say how many people are in your family. They say how many mouths are in your family. So that's either mouth or it's person, depending. The next character there is field. Okay, so the whole character together means a blessing. God and the first person in the garden. Isn't that too much? Now remember, these are written before the Bible. This is in their culture, in their history.
Wow. So the horizontal line is 1.
This one is devil, or mugwa, and actually, you know what they call the devil? The secret man of the garden.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you remember when Lucifer pulled Eve aside there a little bit and talked to her personally a little bit and seduced her a little bit? And then she seduced her husband Adam, and there they went. But this is kind of interesting because they do call it the secret man of the garden. Now, the first character up there is Field, and then that slash, whenever you see that slash on a character, it means that there's life present. Human life is present somewhere in that character, it's saying. So you have that, and then this little character here, this one, that means secret. Secret. And the other legs coming down there means the secret man of the garden. Now, this is it. This is the character for being tempted. Who's it here? This character here. This character here always means a covering or a shelter or of some sorts, right? So then we've got these two characters here. What do they look like? What do you think they are? Trees. Each one is a tree, 2 trees. So here's the devil, the secret man, amongst the 2 trees in the covering of 2 trees. The tree of the life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So undercover, protecting the trees. This one is to covet or to desire. 2 trees, and you know what this character is at the bottom of the 2 trees? Female, woman. That's what that means. So the woman coveted what was in the 2 trees of the knowledge of the good and evil. She coveted that, the Bible says. She wanted knowledge to be like God. So that's the Chinese character to covet. This is my favorite character, which I have glued on my Harley, and I'll tell you the story about that. It's my favorite. That means righteousness, or you are righteous. You've been made righteous. The top character here, this character right up here, is a sheep or a lamb. And the character underneath it is the character for me or I. So I, under the lamb, have been made righteous. That is so precious. This is the character for large boat. Not small boat, but large boat. The character to the left is always designating what the whole character is about. So this character on the left means large vessel by itself. The other character is 8. 8. And what does mouth mean? People. 8 people in a large vessel is their character for Noah's Ark. You know, that whole thing. So it's just, see, you know what the moral of this story is? Now remember this. God's already been where you're going. He's already been with that person in some way, in some manner, either in their folklore or in your culture, in their heart. He's been there before you got there. And he's already prepared the way for you to speak, or whatever's going on there. He's been there already, even in these countries where they've been shut. China was shut for over 50 years. And all the foreign ministers were kicked out of China and killed and persecuted. All the Chinese pastors were killed and put in jail. I'll show you one. And 50 years later, they opened up, I think around 1986. My first trip over was in 86. I think they opened in 86. I was called to China in 1972. And one learning I've learned out of that is the calling ain't the sending. So some of you have been called, and it ain't happening yet. I went to those years. It was very hard for me to go through those years. As I said, I had a divorce, and I didn't think I'd ever get to China. Never did. So that's important to know, that the calling ain't the sending, and God has been there before you got there. So when they opened up China, after 50 years of being closed, there were more Christians there underground than there were before they persecuted everybody. But they were no good teaching. They were hard, Bibles were hard to get. I have seen handwritten Bibles that were serving a village of 3,000 people. One Bible, written in hand. I've seen it. I didn't go there to smuggle Bibles. I waited 12, I was saved in 72. I didn't get there till I was living there until 1990. I waited a long time to get there, and there's no way I was going to get involved with Bible smuggling. That's not what I wanted to do. Didn't want to do that. You're out of there. You're in jail or you're out. And so I didn't want to get involved in that. Went over to teach pastors and young men and women of God. But it just so happened that one of the main Bible coordinators that was coordinating the smuggling from the south, which we'll show you, he had an emergency at home and he needed the guy to take over. I didn't want to do that, but I did, and I ended up taking over for about 3 years. So finally we got busted, our whole system. But that's where I learned and met a lot of underground pastors. They would come 3-4 days on a hard seat train to get Bibles. This is funny. I was coordinating these teams coming up from Hong Kong, maybe 15 people with their pastor, or 10 or sometimes 50 of them. They'd all be smuggling Bibles with these big bags coming up there, right? And they all wanted Christian souvenirs. And so I had started a small business over there with some Chinese, and they were making these little medallions for me. They're about this big around, maybe. And there's the characters that we were saying, and it's all listed in their magnets, and they stick on. And I sold, or I would tell everybody, we'd have these banquets after they got rid of all the Bibles, and we would invite some of the older Christian Chinese pastors up to be a witness to them and share with them what's going on and stuff. And they wanted these souvenirs, so I made up these. I think I paid 25 cents a piece to have them made, and I was selling them for $1 or $1.25 to the foreigners that were coming in with Bible teams. But I would tell them, listen, this isn't for the poor little missionary. This is a business. I'm saving this money up. I don't know what I'll do with it. And over, I think, 5 years or something like that, I had like $12,000 or $13,000. It's how I bought my first Harley. And when God called me to China, he called me to China in 72, but when I was going to China, I finally went in 1990 to move. I said, man, I'll never have a Harley now, man. I mean, there's no Harleys in China, right? But you know what? One day I was walking across the street in Beijing, and I heard just behind me. I said, no way. No way. And I turned around, and there's a Harley. This foreigner sitting on a Harley, and he shoveled under the table to get it in there, I'll tell you that. It cost him a lot of money. Now, there's Harleys all over China. Believe it or not, in Beijing, they got a Harley ship dealer. And they're paying double price because of the duty that they're paying. Like, Trump's bitching at them. Oops, I'm sorry. But, and they got clubs over there in all kinds of cities. They have rallies, like 10,000 Harleys show up. I can't even hardly believe it. So it's changed a lot, right? But anyway, that's how I got my Harley. And I have this one. Righteousness, only the background is black and gold, and I have it glued right on my little handlebars right there. It's really cool. So, God bless me. I didn't get to ride it much until I got home, but now this is the deal here. This is Mao Zedong, and he was a terrible man. I mean, he was a demon-possessed man for sure. And did you ever hear of the Cultural Revolution when that happened? Every any family or any person that's over 50, and almost every family in all of China was affected by the Cultural Revolution. Children were turning in their parents. It was just terrible. And then the Gang of Four came after him, his wife, and 3 other guys. They were just terrible people. They just ruined China completely. I could go on for hours about that, but I meet families that have been deeply hurt by this, and their children even today. They're young children, 30 years old. They have a poster now all around China and says the healing has begun. It's a huge poster, and it's a play about how they're just coming. As much as that prosperity and all that isn't the answer, it's still a blessing to see these people be able to have some food and some cars and some TVs, and it's good to that, and there's bad to that, right? But it's still a blessing. A lot of them are being healed from that whole situation. Very, very deep wound in China. Very deep. So this guy that's now in charge is one of these guys. Only he's got a vision. I mean, he wants to control the internet, and he wants to control a lot of things. They're off into the China Sea, building islands and airplanes, and they're extremely aggressive right now. And so the 2 time clocks, the main one, of course, is Israel, and the second one could be China. Just keep your eye on China. Because let's see. Oh, I know. This is one of those that gets stuck. So they have these monuments still around all over the universities and stuff like that, all the Cultural Revolution. The revolution, see, Mao Zedong said interesting 2 things.
power comes out of the barrel of a gun. The second one was, without the shedding of blood, there will be no revolution. Jesus said without the shedding of blood, there'll be no forgiveness of sins. And power, we have a revolution, didn't we? When I was coming into the Lord, it was heavy duty. I mean, it was like, doubts and fighting and within myself and everything, and I finally gave in to the Lord. And so there's a lot of old school people in China still that love Mao and followed him, and there's many of them that just can't stand, the youth can't stand the whole situation. But this guy coming up now is another one. I mean, he's doing it in a different way. And these are just statues in Tiananmen Square. That's the type of spirit that was going on since they opened up China. All through those 50 years they were closed. It was all this kind of stuff, real hard stuff, no love, just brutal, basically. Now in China, we're getting into the underground church now. There's an underground church in China, and then there's a government church in China. The government church in China is called the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, Sanzi. Three self means self-supporting, self-governing, and self-propagation. Now, there's a lot of Christians in these churches, but many of the pastors are not saved. They go to Bible school down in Nanjing, which is one of their Bible schools, and they come out as just people that want a job. That's what they're doing. They're not saved. They know the Bible. And so there's no teaching in these churches. And in the underground churches, the teaching is very, very weak. But they love the Lord. And so it was detrimental for them to get good teaching and good Bibles. We were smuggling all kinds of stuff in there. Like I say, that's not what I was really wanting to do. But the Three Self-Patriotic Movement is still going on today. See, a lot of what I'm saying is when I was there for 20 years and moving that way, some of these pictures are that way too. When I went back this time, I can't explain it, but pictures weren't cutting it for me. What was going on was like more precious. And so I didn't take a lot of pictures of this last trip, and I didn't put them on here. So these are a little older, but it's the same things are going on. They're just a little more glorified or a little more easy. So the Three Self-Patriotic Movement is within the Communist Party, and the United Front Work Department is submitted to them, and the Religious Affairs Bureaus are submitted to, you can just see there, and the Three Self-Patriotic Movement is submitted to that. So it's all controlled by the government. The interesting thing is that a lot of the pastors in the Three Self seminaries are getting saved right now in the past 10 years. And so a lot of the Three Self churches are on the move in a way. But they're still very soft in the teaching. And they're getting a lot of milk, but not a lot of meat. But I am surprised that some of them, and a lot of them are keeping tune, because a lot of it, like Gmail's blocked over there for me, and I think YouTube is blocked in China. A lot of stuff is blocked in China where it's very hard to get it to come up on screen. But they've got ways to get around that, these young people in China, and they hook on to other things. So there are a lot of them are aware of Israel, the temple, and Trump, and I say, hey, do you guys like Trump? And some of them go, and then I start telling them about what Trump's doing. They go, oh, really? Stuff like that. So some of them are in tune, but a lot of them are not too in depth in the scriptures. And so there's still a need there. And I'm even considering, I went back this year just to reconnect and see my friends once more before I go up or down, wherever you want to say. I'm not going down, brother. And if I do, it'll be burning, that's for sure. But so I went back, but as I started to go over there, the Lord was putting things on my heart there. One was forgiveness. I hope I can tell you about this. So when I got home on the 13th, 22nd, there was an email for me on the 13th from Rick, and it was about inviting me to come down here. And I just got in, right? And I've got all kinds of stuff going on inside of me. I mean, I like to speak when stuff's going on, And so the China stuff is a little back there, but it's still moving, and it's all connected. And so I had a bunch of stuff on my heart, and I hope it comes out today, a little bit of it. Let's see, maybe I can use this now. There was, yeah. Now this is Pastor Yuan and his wife. Pastor Yuan was in prison for 26 years. He had 6 children, 26 years in prison, and this is his precious wife. I don't know if you've heard of Watchman Nee, but Watchman Nee and him, Watchman Nee was in a different prison. Have you heard of Watchman Nee at all? He was in a different prison. He died in prison. And he was in a different prison. But she and Watchman Nee's wife lived together for many, many years with their children. And they had several, I used to go over to their house, and they used to have angelic visits that brought groceries and money. And the Communist Party was trying to, he was very well known in the church. The church wasn't underground so much then, but it did get that way. He went to prison for one reason. He would not join the Three Self-Patriotic Church. That's why. It wasn't denying Christ or a part of it. But they offered her and Watchman Nee's wife all kinds of money and perks, apartments and stuff like that, if they would publicly denounce their husbands in jail, which they did not. And so he lived in poverty for many years until when I got into China, he was just getting out. And he was forbidden to, he was under house arrest, and I used to go, and where he lived were in these hotels, and the old part of China, it's like the movies. The streets are like this, and they're dark, and they're cracked, you know, they're old, and he lived there, and people would still meet with him, and people, they could maybe put 50 people in the place he lived, and then they were overflowing into these alleyways. He always wanted me to come to his meetings, but I was kind of afraid to go there because of the spies, the communist spies. But he hung out with Billy Graham every time he would come. Billy Graham would come. The Chinese would have Billy Graham come over because it looked good, right? That's good for, because they claim they do have religion and that it is freedom of religion. That's what they claim. They are not allowed to preach the second coming of Jesus. That's how serious it is. They can't allow that to happen, because when you do that, you are now putting your loyalties and your faith and your everything into this new coming, this new kingdom, this new government, and boy, that just threatens them to the bottom line. And so he was just out of prison when I was there, and I used to provide him Bibles. And then Billy Graham came to town once, and he was there, and Billy Graham visited his house for the first time ever. Billy Graham had been in an underground church in China. He'd been there 3 times, I think, and his wife was raised and born in China, if you remember, Billy Graham's wife. And I didn't go to that meeting because I knew darn well that we'd be spies there, right? So I'm underground. I got a visa working for a company, and that's why they saw me in China. But I was working with these people, supplying them Bibles at that time, even though I didn't want to be. But they passed away now. But he's one of the men that we would have come at these banquets where these Bible smuggler kids and people would, once they got rid of the Bibles from the motel, which was very, very sensitive and dangerous, that was the handoff place usually, is in the hotels. They would come in with these bags. I'll show you some pictures of that. And then we would take the Bible. We would call the pastors from all over the countryside, and they'd come in and pick up these Bibles at the hotels. And so we would provide him also with these materials. So he was a very important person in China. This is kind of a funny story. I was in Chengdu, and I was very tired, and I had some Bibles with me. Chengdu is a ways from Beijing, and I went into my hotel room, and I was sleeping on the 10th floor. And I looked out just for the fun of it. I looked out, and what I saw down below is about 3 or 4 workmen building down here. They're building a wall across here. Can you see? They're building a wall across here, and they got these panels up here for the sides of the building. And I said, I wonder if I can drop a few Bibles down there. If they'll hit, you know. And so I had these little square, you know, they're little compact Chinese Bibles. And then I'd throw one out the window and go, way over to the left, and try another to go to the right. And finally I dropped one right down in the center of them, you know, and go look, and he looked at it, and I'm back, way back. And then I said, holy cow, I'm going to get caught for this. You know? And so anyway, it kind of scared me when it landed right in front of them all, right? And so I just went and lay down and took a nap, right? And so I get up for the nap, and I just wander over the window, and I look down there, and this guy's reading one, right? So I threw about 3 or 4 more down there, and they all landed right smack dab in the middle of them. And you know what? I know for sure this is the first time they probably ever read the scriptures. That was a cool, one of my favorite stories of China. Now this is how it kind of worked. This is China down here. The new territories are right down below. The China's up in here. This is all China below too, the new territories, which are now China. In 1997, that got handed over after 100 years of British rule. And I was there for that handover. It was quite emotional. It was big time stuff. So now this is the first time China's owned these new territories. But along that route, this is the train state, this is a train route, and all along that route are missionaries that have been there for years, and they have printed, that's where they print all the Bibles. A lot of the Bibles that go into China are there. And so what happens were teams were coming in from all kinds of churches, and then they would phone me. They would go to Hong Kong where it was free, and then they would phone me or email. No, it wasn't email yet, but anyway, they would just tell me somehow which hotel they were going to be in, and they would say, "We've got 10 people." Well, I knew 10 people meant 20 bags, 2 bags for each person, and they were usually Bibles. And then stuff started coming in that were teaching materials. So they would tell me what hotel they're in. I would meet them at the hotel. And then that's the sensitive part. We would not use Chinese to transfer those Bibles. That's the most dangerous part of the whole thing. So they would, after they're checking into the, this is actually comical, but it's very scary. When they're checking in, right, they're checking in, and then the people that work in the hotel, the little countryside people, precious people, "Oh, can we carry the bag?" No, they're really heavy, you know, so no, we didn't want them to carry the bags. Well, what's in these bags? They weigh 20,000 pounds, you know, each one. And so once they got up in the hotel room, they got settled, all of a sudden they're coming back down the elevator with these bags. Now that doesn't look too cool, right? They just checked in with these bags. Now they're coming out with these bags. And there's guards at the doors of these hotels. And then they get them into a taxi, into a Miandi, and then we would meet them. We would meet our Chinese contacts somewhere out in Beijing area or in the countryside, and we hand them off to those people. And that was a precious moment. But we got busted. The whole system got busted. Mine did. I don't know how many years ago it was. I mean, how long it was I was there. But I had to lay low and cut all my contacts that I made over the years. I had to get out into the countryside where some foreigners had some influence, and I stayed there. And then I got out of China. This is before the computers were they were looking for us. And they confiscated some pictures of myself and some of my friends. And then, so I waited for a week or two, and then I got out on the airplane. And then I was worried about not being able to get back in. They'd catch me at the border or something, but I did get back in. But I stopped messing around with the Bible stuff. I got that doing with someone else and got back, because I didn't want to get permanently knocked out of there. And so that was a pretty good experience. But once we get across this border, see, the foreigners would come in down below there in the south, in Hong Kong, and they would stay at missionary places where there were like dormitories. And they're very cheap. You could sleep there and stay there and then what they would do is they would pack up and they would run Bibles across this border. It wasn't too dangerous really, because there were so many thousands going across this border, but the foreigners stuck out a lot more. But we didn't use it. And so once we got across the border, they would take them and store them. We called them the bakeries. We had all these code words that all the police knew anyway, but we used them anyway. So they would store all these Bibles in the bakeries, right? And then what they do is they'd come back and they'd get another load. Sometimes they could do 2 loads a day. So we're getting all this material into China. Now, if they wanted to go to another city, like Beijing or Shanghai or whatever, some of the people would come over and they would take a train. And once they're across the border into China, they'd go to the bakeries and get their Bibles, because they're not going to get searched anymore. They're now in China. The Bibles are in there. So they can take them on the trains or the planes. And I mean, now and then they'll get busted. But sometimes our bakeries did get busted over there. The police take them. The generals in the armies take them from the police, and then the generals in the army go sell them to the underground church. So there they are. we didn't charge the Chinese, but the generals were making all this money, you know. So we were beaten in both ways. This is a team, I think they were from Virginia. And they phoned me, "We got 20 guys coming, they're staying at wherever, the Chinese World Hotel or whatever." So I'd meet them there. And when I got there, this is what they brought. Usually it's these bags. So now I got 20 million thousand books, and I only got about 4 or 5 pastors coming in from the countryside, so I didn't know what are we going to do. Because we don't want them in the rooms, right? We want to get them out of there as soon as possible. But this was cool, and it was a lot of fun that these kids did that. I mean, there were a lot of the Jesus videos in Chinese. You know, they got the Jesus story in every language now. And that's very powerfully done. A lot of Chinese got saved through those. So these went to countrysides, most of them and all of them. And after I kind of got that off my back, during the time I was doing this, we did have 2 or 3 underground churches in Beijing area. And we were meeting in apartments. And we were doing everything there, baptizing. See, what happened was there was a brother I met, and if you can pass this on to others because it's still very valuable. The American English teachers, especially one that's been to college and has the degrees to teach a second language, they are the most powerful missionaries in China because they get into the universities. And the government in many cities will turn their back. They know they're going to be teaching out of the Bible because they're all Christians, a lot of them. And they'll just turn their back as long as they're teaching English. But they'll teach the English out of the Bible in these classrooms. And the government got to a place where they would rather have a Christian school teacher teaching English rather than a non-Christian, because the non-Christian is disrespectful to authority, he doesn't keep his contracts, and he gets into politics, where the Christian guys don't do any of that. They just teach English, right, until they come to their home or something. So they prefer the Christian school teachers. So this is very powerful even today. So if you've got young kids or relatives, or they want to know what to do with their life and they're Christians, and you don't have to have a degree. You do to get into the bigger universities. But factories will hire you. Anybody, they'll pay you pretty good and supply you an apartment and everything if you want to teach English. Now, I didn't want to teach English. I don't even know English very well. I mean, really, those guys, when they go to college, they know, they can write English, and they know English grammar better than any of us here. They just can't speak and hear, good, because they don't have someone like us teaching them, but when they're speaking it. So this guy I met, Jay, we worked together probably 6 years. He had a very, very, I would call it a pastoral, apostolic call on his life. He drew people around. But he wasn't walking in a big vision, And so I joined up with him because I was supplying him Bibles, and we became a team together. He couldn't do what I did, and I could not do what he did, and that's how it should be. The spiritual gifts should be working that way. Your eye can't do it, your foot can do, right? That's what the Bible teaches us. And that's why I believe in a multitude of leadership and teachers in a congregation, not one person all the time, because the other gifts got to be functioning and equipping us so that what? We can do the ministry. That's what the Bible says, Ephesians 4. So we had a wonderful time together, never an argument between us at all. So he would a lot of times ask me to come into the English classes and teaching and speak so that they could hear another type of a speaker. But they all, somewhere along the line, they'd always say, raise your hand, well, we hear that everybody in America believes in God and all this sort of thing. That whole thing would just open up. And I would get into these characters and draw them up on the blackboard, right, about what they mean. And they would go, wow, that can't be true. And they'd take me to the professor that knows all the English, the Chinese guy, and he's looking at it. So it was just a really powerful tool to be able to show them in their own characters that God was there a long time ago in the form of Jesus, right? And there's a book, it's called Eternity in Their Hearts. Have you ever heard of that, Eternity in Their Hearts? You have? I think the guy's name was Richardson that wrote it, but it's a great book, it's an older book, but it tells you about all the cultures where God has already been before the missionary got there. But the people, they think it's folklore. They think the flood is folklore, right? So these characters, I was going to want to walk this out a little bit, but if we start from the left, let's say the book of Genesis, right? We got the book of Genesis, then we got Abraham, and we got the flood, Noah, and then we've got the Tower of Babel, right? Tower of Babel. So everyone on the earth that was created from Genesis to the Tower of Babel did what? They spoke the same language. They have the same history. They knew about the flood. And so that's why when the Lord said, whoa, they're speaking the same language, And they can do whatever in their minds they conceive to do, and this ain't good. Evil is going all over the earth, and boom, he hit them, right? And they went all over the earth. Well, that's why there's Bible stories in their culture, because prior to that, just like we showed you with the flood, Noah's Ark, that's in their culture when they wrote them, right? So this is one of the big time end signs right now. What's the main language that everybody's studying today? English. The whole world is speaking English, and there's no stopping what they can conceive in their minds to do. This is very serious, especially in this non-gender, biological switching roles, and this whole thing with men and women, they're the same, they're no different, you know, that whole thing. That's not a good thing to be doing in front of the Lord. The Lord is, I won't use the word mad. You know, he has aught against the nations right now, big time. And judgment, you know, things are moving right now, so we want to be aware of these things. It's very important that I think that we're aware of a lot of what's going on. And right now, what I'm fighting against in the churches, I know pastors, from my experiences in China and speaking in different churches, I know a lot of pastors and leadership, and you can't talk about end times. You know why? One thing. Jesus said you'll never know the day, and you'll never know the hour. And they take that and spread it this wide. They don't mention that Jesus said, I want you to know the signs of the times when things are near. Because when you see this happening, you know that it's near, and I'm at the door. See, they don't want to talk about this. And we should know these things. They're right in the scriptures. Just 1 Thessalonians 5 talks about that. About the thief in the night coming, right? But not to us, the thief in the night, those that are not watching and those that are not saved. But they stop right there. He's going to come as a thief in the night. Nobody will know the day or the hour. That's how they go. They go parallel. They don't go to the next verse where it says, we should not know. And he starts out, or we should know. And he starts out that whole chapter, there's no need for me to tell you these things. What do you mean? Because he's already been talking to them about these things. But you can't get a pastor in town to talk about it, right? And I'll just read is it First Chronicles? Which chapter is that? I'm trying to think now. 12:30, I think it talks about the armies that were gathering around David. It lists all the kings and their armies. I counted them up yesterday on the calculator. Come up with 350,000 military people gathering on David. But there was one, son of Issachar, he actually knew the signs of the times to tell Israel what they should do. And he had 200 chiefs under him that also knew the signs of the times, so they would know what to do. We need to know the signs of the times. And it was always on Paul's heart. Always. He lived right at that edge all the time, talking about this second coming of the Lord. And we've cried wolf for too long. The wolf's coming, man. This, you know, it could be a while yet, but time's moving. It is moving like fast. We can't keep up with everything that's going on. I don't know how many of you can come tonight, but I just want to go back a little bit and show how significant that the blood moons were and what's going on and what times. I have almost everything I would say is factual. There's only one little thing that's speculative in my presentation if you come tonight. It's just stuff that's already happened and going on, and it's right in our face, you know. And it's not about gloom and doom. It's about joy. It's about the second coming, and it's for those who love the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, right? And Paul was there all the time. That's where he was at. And you know what? What if I'm wrong? So what? What's it? Not heresy, but the Lord wants us looking. He wants us to search these things out and know. The fig tree, you know, and the generation, when you see that, what is a generation? How long is a generation? And where are we going to start counting from? Well, it's factual. A lot of that information is factual. And the things that happen on blood moon days, on the feast days, that's all factual. It's confirmed by NASA. But the Lord puts these things in there to make us expectant, you know, and joyful about this thing. This is a baptism we're doing. This is the early days, man. We weren't baptizing. We're baptizing in baptism. Well, I can't fit all of that. We dunk it the first half and put the second half in later. But they would come out just praising the Lord and speaking in tongues sometimes. They're just great. this is the lady here we're going to rub. Now, this lady, can you see her little belly button down there? Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that. Sorry. She didn't like that very much. She was highly educated, and her father was a big player in the Boxer Revolution. He was a pastor during the Boxer Rebellion. If you know anything about that, in China is when they killed a lot of the Christians. And she went to America, became a doctor, and very well educated, and she felt to come back because that was the time, you know, her youth in those days. And she came back to China and gave up her education and the money she was making and joined the churches there and helped educate them in English and things like that. And she was a sweetheart. She really got pretty old. We used to go to her house a lot until she started getting a little, you know, age, and oh yeah, the police come over. Well, we've seen, oh, Jim McKean, yes, we know. And she started doing that, so I had to stop seeing her very much. She didn't realize what she was doing, you know. Telling them our name. These are some of the folks that we baptized that night. Now, this is a particular village in China. It's a communist situation there. And this guy here was the mayor. And we witnessed to him for a long time, and he came up to us at the very end and just said to us, I just can't be I just can't believe in Jesus, because if I do, I lose everything. I lose my house, I lose my income, I'd probably run out of the village and things like that. And we said, you know what? You can be a secret disciple, just like the one that took Jesus off the cross. Because of the fear of the Jews, he was a secret disciple. The Bible says that. So you don't have to be in everybody's face, you know, use your mind. So we don't know if he ever really accepted the Lord or not, but it really touched my heart when he kind of said he wanted to, but he was afraid to. So. And now this is interesting. This is my interpreter here. This lady right up here, Wang Xixin, and then that's me. And the rest of these folks are coming in from the countryside, and where they don't get good teaching, they hardly have any Bibles. And what we do is we put them in these apartments, and we teach in the mornings and in the evenings, and then they go out for a walk and, you know, get out of there. But it's kind of a hard deal. I was teaching in the evenings. And one evening as I was teaching them, I just stopped in the middle and I said, you know, I want to ask you guys something in the countryside. I said, does the Three Self, have any of you ever been really persecuted by the Three Self Church? You know, your houses burned down, your cattle taken away, fined and all that stuff. And they started looking around at each other. Well, guys stood up and said, well, we are the Three Self Church. So these are all guys from the Three Self Church that weren't getting teaching, and they were all coming in to just get equipped. So it was really a blessing, but I was shocked. And so we taught them about the wonderful spiritual gifts and the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And at the end of the night, they were all filled. I mean, they'd never like raised their hands and praised God before, probably. But they were just a blessing. I mean, this is a while back. Who knows what they're doing now and where they are. But these are some of the experiences that we've had over there. This is an interesting story. We had just set some leaders in place, and I was going to go home for a while, sabbatical, maybe 3 months or something like that. And so they were sending me out, and this brother here is one, I shouldn't have favorites, but I did, and he was a dynamic preacher. And you know, Chinese men have been, can I say, emotionally castrated by the Communist Party. It's a matriarchal society. You wouldn't think so, but it is. And the men have no respect for themselves. They have no spirit of entrepreneurship. They don't want any responsibilities, nothing. They're very hard to express their emotions or anything like that. It's a sad thing, it really is. Our network, when we had like maybe 10 or 12 underground home churches with total of maybe 350 people, you know, 30 people in each church or something. But he was one of the most dynamic ones. I mean, he would get in there and just preach and edify and build up people. So we ordained him, along with another brother, to kind of oversee the work, and we went home for a while. And I wouldn't tell you this if I thought you'd ever see this guy. But he's still my favorite, one of my favorites. But he ran off with a woman. And I had no sooner landed in America when they phoned me on this. And my father in the Lord, Jim Durkin, He used to tell us, if you guys are on the mission field and you're in a country somewhere and you ever need anything, I will come there. I will be there. I'll come and get you, or I'll help you. I no sooner landed and got this, and I remember Jim saying that to me. So I hopped on an airplane and I went back, and he's with this woman in a different city somewhere, and we could only talk on the phone, and finally we got up to come back, and he let go of that whole thing, and he got back with his wife, and there was some forgiveness done, and they lived a good life after that, and then she died of cancer. But he could never forgive himself. And he could never, a lot of people say, well, the Lord's forgiven you, but you haven't forgiven yourself. I don't believe you can forgive yourself. If you can forgive yourself, then you don't need the Lord's forgiveness, that's for sure. I think it's more like the words to be used are more like you haven't accepted His forgiveness for you. And that's been working in my heart big time. Just the whole concept of forgiving people and asking forgiveness and giving forgiveness. I think we take that a little too lightly, and I think sometimes because we've done it with Him, I don't have to do it with you. And so He could, and I'd like to hopefully share that with you. Am I okay on time, or I don't know what we do?
Yeah, we have no time.
Okay.
here.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, remind me to get back to that forgiveness thing. So anyway, it was sad. It took him a year or two to even, and even today I don't think he's totally right. I mean, he just has a hard time. But this picture, I just loved this picture, and I had it in my luggage. And somehow my luggage got wet on the plane or somewhere. I don't know how this happened. I pulled this picture out, and here's what it looks like.
That's your luggage?
No, this is the picture that got wet. Do you see what it is? Do you see two halves of an oyster shell with a pearl in the middle? That's what the Lord did. I showed him this picture and I said,
Okay.
you see this pearl?
Yeah, I know.
Chun, do you see that? That's who you are. That's what the Lord is telling you, you are. In spite of what happened here 2 years ago or a year ago. So this is, I got this framed. Here he looks at it. Just like you guys think. But isn't that something how the Lord would kind of do something like that? Precious.
So that's,
This is a typical home church of ours, and if you'll notice, a lot of them are women. And when we got there, that was probably one of my biggest surprises and challenges in China. It is a matriarchal society, but it's ruled with a heavy chauvinistic government, male government, and it's a weird. I don't know how much you know about Jezebel, the spirit of Jezebel, but I personally feel as the Holy Spirit is a representation of Jesus on the earth and doing the work of the Lord, so is Jezebel, that too, Satan, the Lucifer. Jezebel is the most powerful spirit on this earth. And what it's doing right now, Jezebel hates prophets. She hates, you call it a male or female, it's a spirit. Hates prophets, is very much responsible for the role reversal, the gender neutral, all that sort of stuff is all Jezebel. It really, sometimes when my Harley breaks down, I blame Jezebel. So, but my Harley hasn't broke down in a long time. But anyway, I don't know how I got off on that. But oh yeah, because these folks, there's a lot of ladies here, and there's some men in the background. But after we were there 4 or 5 years, and we started our home churches and stuff, we were starting to get known as one of the few systems that had male leadership, and a lot of the ladies were just grateful to see that happening in a way, because they wanted to see them. The men were just no, and now the reason China is booming like it is and so prosperous, besides using our money, is they have the men are doing business again, and they're entrepreneurs, and they are good business. Like Trump says, they outdo us in negotiations and stuff. And so this was a very precious one of the. We had 12 of these groups right here. Now I've looked up some of this is a long time ago, these pictures, and a lot of them are still in the church doing work, and a lot of them are in business, doing very well in business, and a lot. The general feeling in China now is they don't even care if it's against a lot of the freedom of speech and this and now all the restrictions of communism, because this is the answer right here: money. If everybody's making money, we don't care who's in the government. See, that's their feeling right now. And that's actually going to be an effectual thing with this what's going on here now. You know, people are, everybody, I don't know what the Trump thing or not, but I mean, that's what they're making. Everybody's starting to prosper, and that's all they care about. They don't care about what's going on spiritually or emotionally or things like that. So you got to keep an eye out on that one. This one here, I don't know if you remember, this is important kind of for today. I don't know if you remember when Clinton was in, they were in this war in Bosnia around that area. I don't know much about it, but you know, remember that. And what happened is somehow there was some surveillance going on out of a city in Bosnia, and they thought it was from the library in the basement, and they were being able to detect the attack patterns of our fighters coming into Bosnia for bombing, and they were able to pinpoint them and, you know, shoot us down or damage our airplanes or whatever. So they were pretty sure that there were people in the basement of this 3 or 4 story building with this surveillance equipment. So they warned everybody in the city, the military, and China, because China was involved on the other side. So they shot a missile in there, and it went doom, 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 and it blew up in the basement, and 2 Chinese were killed. I was on the streets that day, and I didn't know that went on at that time, but I'm on the streets, and all of a sudden, buses were coming in, and there were just thousands of students were climbing out of these buses and going to the embassy and throwing rocks, and all over the country. That was, and I was the only foreigner around there, and people were mad at me and looking at me and stuff like this, right? And this kind of stuff was written on the cement, you know, in different buildings and stuff. But what the Lord showed me on that, this happened in one day, is that because of the corporate communism mentality, they're all raised up corporately, they all live in the same buildings. If they work in a particular factory, they wear the same clothes. Nobody is more prosperous than the other person. And what they did is the government can speak to China as one person. It's like one mind. They can speak to China and say, do this, and everybody does it. If it's wearing Mao hats, everybody wears Mao hats. If it's doing this, protesting, boom, all over China they're out, just like that. So when I went to China this time, I was shocked about how much they have progressed secularly in 6 years. All that they've done, it's amazing. I usually wasn't traveling around that much in China, but this trip, I flew into 2 or 3 different airports, smaller cities, not big famous cities. Beijing is always a showcase, but we went into these cities and they were just immaculately clean. The airports were clean. The systems to get airplane tickets and train tickets, and it's just all together, all over China. They just spoke to China. They just speak to one person, clean this country up, right? Boom, they just do it. It's amazing, and it's scary. Because all these dictators and all these countries that we don't appreciate too much are prospering. They're building armies, and they got airplanes, and they got bombs, and they got financial leverage, just like we're fighting it right now. So this is a very important time when China awakes. The whole world's going to tremble, and they are trembling. I mean, Japan and Korea and all these people, Taiwan. Taiwan's a big deal. That's a huge deal. Because Chiang Kai-shek, when Mao came in, Chiang Kai-shek ran out of China with thousands of people, but he took all the artwork, all the gold, everything into Taiwan. And now, you know, the free world protects Taiwan from China going in there, but China's just waiting to get that country back. And if you're a businessman and you want to go into China and they ask you, do you believe Taiwan is ours or not? If you say no, you don't go into China to do business. It's that serious, dude. So, this kind of is, I'll try to, you can see here, China, or Israel, is right here. China's way over here. And this is kind of an end time thing that I drew up a long time ago, but this is, right now, I believe this is kind of happening. I don't know how many, and I don't know that much about it, but I believe there's 2 more wars coming, and that is the Ezekiel War, where it happens along the Euphrates River. It's going to be a limited regional atomic war, and over 1/3 of the world's population will go dead, gone. When that happens, that's because Russia's coming down, and now Turkey's moving across out of some other reason. They're getting another reason that they're fighting the Kurds, but they want to get over into that area. All these people want to take Israel out, as you know, right? So this is happening, right? That wasn't happening when I was drawing this out. But that's what it kind of looks like. You got Iran coming across, and I believe that the 200 million army is China coming across the Euphrates River. Some people think it's the Arabic armies, but I really don't think that. So the Euphrates River is a key right now to watch. It's one of the things to watch. And what they just did in Syria, right? Syria is right north of Israel, right? It's right there. So this thing that's going on where they just shot missiles into Syria, all this is stuff that I watch a little bit, you know, just to see what's forming. But we'll see. This is more of a close-up of that. So the act of watching, you know, that's kind of this was the title of a presentation I made about the blood moons, and I made this in 2013 or 14. Have you heard of Pastor Biltz out of Tacoma, Washington? He's the guy that came up with discovered the blood moon thing. And somehow I came across his path around 2013, and I got into studying this because the Lord told me this is big. This is the last set of blood moons. The blood moons are a dime a dozen, but only 3 times prior to this one, only 3 times have they ever been on Passover, the feast, and Tabernacles. And then the following year, the same thing. That's only happened 3 times, except for this last one. And every time that's happened, significant things have happened to Israel. And now we have this one that's just happened. So I did a presentation here on this. It's 40 minutes long, and you can go online and watch it. But I was going to share a little bit of that maybe tonight if enough people come by or come back. But there's some stuff in there. I learned so much about, see, the Bible, the Lord took the Holy Spirit and imparted Scripture to Jews, to the Jews. That's who wrote the Bible, the Jews, nobody else. And there's a lot of things that are going on there, like the 7 feasts. If you know anything about the 7 feasts, it's actually a prophetic blueprint of the end times. The 7 feasts. The first one was Passover. The second one, and then the same day was the unleavened bread. The same day, a little later. I can explain this tonight. The third feast is first fruits, which is the resurrection, and then the fourth feast, which is these are all spring feasts. The fourth feast, 50 days later after the resurrection, is Pentecost. Now the fall feasts. There's 3 fall feasts. Go ahead.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay. The 3 fall feasts are not fulfilled. The spring feasts are fulfilled. They've all been fulfilled. So what does that say? It says that Jesus will come in the fall. Because the last feasts, the last 3, are the trumpets, atonement, and the wedding feast, right? That hasn't happened yet. So there's a particular fact that when you say, we won't know the day or the hour, so why not, we can't figure anything else out, it's not true. There's a lot of things we should see that should be encouraging us. So we just don't know what fall of what year, right? But I think that's going to become more obvious as signs are open. Just like Daniel, a lot of things are being opened up there on the Daniel. He said, put that away, and the end days all will reveal what's been happening. So I don't know, have you been able to read that, or should I read it? It's just the purpose of this presentation is to remind and to establish the simplest format, certain prophetic proclamations and their current and past fulfillments in relationship to historical and current events and the relationships to signs in the heavens and on the earth, resulting in expectations, joy in the heart of you, the believer, who looks towards the second coming of the Lord Jesus. It is not my intention to predict future events and their dates that will soon be upon us, but to cause you to consider for yourself what time it is. And Jesus, down at the bottom, and the Holy Spirit, and Paul demands this constant expectation. They expect you to be excited about this, not to be afraid about it, not to be ignorant about it. And a lot of it is very, very simple. A lot of it's very simple when you start. Well, the proclamation of the United Nations in 1948, as Jim has taught you, becomes a nation. That's significant. That's, besides the virgin birth, the crucifixion, and the resurrection is probably the most important prophetic event fulfilled. It's one of them. The other one is when they took back Jerusalem in the 6-day war. That was a total miracle. It's the first time in 2,500 years they've had all of Jerusalem. That's big. And Trump, like him or not, has just proclaimed that it is the capital of Israel. We're moving our embassy over there. He said within 2 years. Now he's saying, but by May. We're going to start building it by May. Once that's done, then the sacrifice. I mean, just all the stuff it's getting exciting. And like I said, if we're wrong, so what? We're excited. But I think the Lord appreciates us looking at these things, just not predicting the dates and causing a lot of fear and stuff like that. So tonight I'd like to maybe share that a little bit. See, Genesis, it says here, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, the things in the sky, let them be for signs. This is Genesis 1:14. Let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years. See, and for days and years. It's not only just for days and years. And the definition down below, a sign, the word is oath, and it's a signal implying coming, appearing. Implies coming, appearing. That's what signs means up here. And seasons, mode, divinely appointed times, God's day timer. He has and keeps predetermined appointments on feast days. Not feast days where you eat. It's not that kind of a feast day where you eat. These are in the heavens. A feast day, specific feast days acknowledging historical and prophetic events, not eating feasts. So these blood moons that happen on these feast days, only 2 feast days ever, it was 450 years before the second set, and then it was, I forget how many years, the next set was the 6-day war, and now in 2015 we've just had another set. What's going to happen now? Well, one thing significant, there's several, I have a list of what's happened. It's not the kind of things that the whole world sees, right? It's not flashing lights and rockets and all that. It's these subtle things that the Jews watch for, right? And we should be watching for them. Get that. If that's Trump, tell him that I already know. Anyway, I would like the privilege and honor to develop some of this, and I can go through it fairly quickly. And it's very simple, but it's just so exciting today a lot of times. You know, even when the Harley doesn't start, I don't care. This is But anyway, if you can make it tonight, I'd appreciate it. And if you can't, praise the Lord. You'll still get to heaven, but probably not in as good a shape as if you came tonight. No, just... Well, thanks a lot, folks. God bless you.
Thanks, Jim. We appreciate that. And tonight it's going to start at 6:30. Any of you that can be here, we would sure welcome you. I think it will be interesting. I found this morning very fascinating, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning more. It's just amazing the things and the way things are working out, as Jim has pointed out to us. The times, the picture of the funnel probably is forever focused in my head, you know, the swirling as it gets to the bottom and the mess that the world is in right now and how fast everything is swirling. So anyway, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Our prayer team will be in the back in Mike's corner back here, and between the bar and the corner. Okay, they're pointing. They're pointing.
Under the clock, sir. It's under the clock.
Okay, but I think they're pointing elsewhere. Food, okay, we've got a ton of food back there.
They're throwing away. What does it do?
Yeah.